Hello, everyone. Sorry, good morning. Sorry, I'm a little bit behind schedule. I was doing my father's thing, so I got held up. But as a result of that, I caused some technical delay. Anyway, thank you, everybody. I can see all of you from various locations, spaces, and places. Nice to see you all, particularly those who are on Zoom. I can see. Facebook I don't access during the talk, so that's why. Anyway, so it's nice to have you. So take a couple of moments. We'll do regular Tibetan Buddhist Society of Canberra's Sunday morning, 11 o'clock meditation combined with the talk. And so take your time. We're going to do the short prayer, renewal of our refuge, and our friendship comes through our refuge in the Triple Gem. So it's always good to know that and renew our refuge and commitment to practice kindness in all times and situations, which are reminded by these prayers. So let's do them together thoughtfully with a sense of purpose and sense of being so present and with the thing we are saying and doing for. I got this one. Sorry? Audio. Is there audio problem? Can you hear me? Can you hear us? Can you hear? Okay, they can hear them. So, okay, we're going to do the prayers. Oh, yanda Buddha Dhamma Sangha Adere Vyuda Ladame by virtue Adyehandala Ashare Padavadu and Abu Dhamma Sangha Atere Vyuda Ladame Bhavacha Adyehandala Ashare Padavadu. May all beings have happiness and cause of happiness. May they be free from suffering and the cause of suffering. May they know our power from the happiness that knows no suffering. May they dwell in equanimity, free from attachment, aversion to those near and far. May all beings have happiness and cause of happiness. May they be free from suffering and the cause of suffering. May they know our power from happiness that knows no suffering. May they dwell in equanimity, free from attachment, aversion to those near and far. May all beings have happiness and cause of happiness. May they be free from suffering and the cause of suffering. May they know our power from happiness that knows no suffering. May they dwell in equanimity, free from attachment, aversion, and those near and far. According to the intelligence and predisposition of the Dharma agrela and karma goes. So everyone, thank you. This morning we're going to combine our meditation on the subject of understanding sentient being, particularly our Father sentient being. Oh gosh, did we understand him? Have we tried to understand again? Because when you become yourself Father, then you tend to understand or try to understand your Father even a little bit more skillfully, because previously we have no experience of being in the shoes of the Father. So it's a very important subject, because when we talk about understanding sentient being, we don't expect to understand sentient being everybody out there, We have to understand sentient beings who are in the immediate circle of our life. And today is a very relevant because it's Father's Day, you know. So if we can spend this hour and a half together, try to reflect through the medium of this talk and how we can better our understanding and then learn to reconnect with our Father in a very skillful way, rather than the ways that we have left in tatters. A lot of people have really not made attempt to reconnect with their Father. How much from the very early first day of his courting with your mother, and what kind of times and journey they may have gone through, and maybe there would be at least a couple of years of a very romantic youthfulness and with the arrival of the little brat. But once the little arrival little brat, it becomes a big big problem, really, and particularly if there's more than one. Imagine what must have put our Father in his life. So I like to share with you that my father had 7 children, and I think 2 who passed away. So altogether 9 children. Just imagine. Imagine a nomadic father living in the middle of nowhere with maybe 50, 60 yaks and a couple hundred sheep and half a dozen horse and a big black tent in the middle of nowhere covered in 8 months of the year in snow blizzards, and having to feed all this mouth and just imagine what must be like to. He started off very poor. He never was wealthy, but his mother's side was a little bit better off. Anyway, so maybe you can, when I'm sharing you some of these anecdotes, maybe I'm trying to facilitate whatever you could recall early days, if you can remember where your father met your mother, and what were their first few years, and their education, their family, the struggles, maybe the love, and then, of course, whatever. And often we don't understand, even as a grown-up person, our Father very well. We become less and less willing to understand. We become so selfish and don't understand someone who has given all of his life, good 20, 30 of years of his really youthful period of his life, to feed, to clothe, to house, to educate, to argue, to defend, to play, to laugh, to cry, everything. He spent all of that life for our own well-being, and much of our own little success in your profession, in your education, in your own family, all are due to his kindness. And there's no doubt that everybody, when they really are generous in recollecting the good and kindness that we've been bestowed with by our parents, there wouldn't be anyone who doesn't feel grateful to their fathers. But what have we done to express that gratitude? This is the question. Can we better that? Is it too late to express our gratitude, whether the father is alive or deceased? It never is. It never is. Because it's not so much what the father needs, particularly if he's not here with us in person. It is what we need to do in order to fill the filial duty of our own self as the person that has been brought up by the sweat and tear of our father. Sometimes when the parental conflict arises, we even tend to take sides, completely go against the father and side the mother, as she was 100% right and he was wrong. And we tend to do that. Thankfully, I never have such experience because my parents were amazing, noble examples. I never see them ever even argue once, My father calls my mother giddy, it's like saying honey in English, We never call honey because culturally it doesn't sound right. My father calls her Gedi, and when he wanted to bring her attention, he really calls that bigger, louder, but never with aggression. It's amazing love between the two. Brought up 9 children, and we went through a really difficult time. I think because our country was invaded in the middle of their early, I would say late 20s, their life was thrown into chaos. And they have 5 children already, and then the journey to escape. 5 children, all of them. The eldest one now was not even 10 years old. So, and they have all these animals. They have this raging army of Red China after us for nothing but wanted to get us for whatever reason. And we just had no choice but to cover our head and run. And our parents have to basically make sure that we are brought into safety. So 6 continuous months we were on the run, on foot, of course. Most of and I and my elder sister, we were too young to walk. My 3 other siblings were old enough to walk, and so and the rest of all the things are all packed on a yak back and horseback, and we were basically walking at the pace that the yaks can walk. And not in this direction directly because we have no idea which direction will be safe, which direction will not. So my father, as a nomadic father, had to do all the unpalatable duties, having to travel a couple of months every year to do trade, and then at least he had to slaughter a good 8 to 20 yaks a year, because the family basically lived on animals. We didn't have anything but animals. Our tent came from yak hair, our food came from yak meat, and our clothes came from yak hair, and our milk, our cheese, our butter all came from female yaks, and without the animals, we don't have any. And when we were escaping, we were all relying on these animals. And animals, whole pack of animals having to drive. And just imagine the father of 9 children having to slaughter good 10 to 20 yaks or maybe 30, 40 sheep a year. Just the karma that he has to create. Now think of your father. What did he have to do to feed you? Maybe not extreme like that, but nevertheless, what kind of tough duties, responsibilities, and tough work situations they have to go through. How early morning they have to rise, how late hours they can barely sleep, and against all odds, our father has become basically very old, frail man just by giving all his youth, savings, energies, knowledge to bring us up. Is that not true? Now, I'll pause here for at least a few minutes, during which you can reflect your early days of your father's commitment and contribution to your life. And of course, maybe you already can register this in the past, but try to rekindle your gratitude towards him, how we can emulate and repay his kindness in a meaningful way. So with this, I ask you to sit upright and observe the first S, the stillness of your posture, and sincerity of the motivation to reconnect with and develop gratitude towards your father. and do that with very one-pointed, serene attention. To just imagine, see your father on the screen, so to speak, his face, and if he's right here, you wouldn't like to say how grateful and thankful you are. And do this with simple. And so I'll leave you there for at least good few minutes. And you don't let your mind wander off. Stay very present. Maybe use the breath to keep yourself very focused, but largely use this analytical meditation in our attempt to understand your dear, kind, old Father. So having reflected about the time and energy and work and duties that your father spent, like that, all father sentient beings who would be a huge percentage in the human population and sentient beings. Not only in human beings, even you look among the wildlife, you can see the father kangaroo, you can see the you can see the other father, other, I don't know how some animals are pretty unattached to the young, or even to their mother, to the wife. Straight away they become really Buddhist, no attachment whatsoever. but but those animals who are like humans, who have a lot of attachment to the wife and to the children, you can see. Then now in this section, I wanted to see all the problems and sufferings, and maybe sickness and difficulties and challenges that your father went through over the years, and how his life has then deteriorated in a physically health and emotional well-being, or his relationship with others, or some couples are very fortunate to have a loving relationship all their life. But did your father enjoy that whole lifelong relationship? But thankfully, my father did. He had a lifelong. He lived 87, and my mother lived 95. I think maybe, if I'm not wrong, they have whole life. There was never a problem. But some fathers often go through a lot of difficulties of being separated, or some losing the wife to death or illness, or some to other unfortunate circumstances. And then not imagine, just remember the suffering your father went through, and how much misunderstanding maybe we ourselves have had then. And maybe some people still continue to hold those views as if the father's fault, as if he's the wrongdoer and he's the one who's responsible. And we continue. Some people haven't spoken to the father for years, just because he made one little wrong turn, or maybe one misfortune happened, and we just some people completely reject the father, and after that, and then as we are taking sides. And if that has happened, what must be like to be the father who's rejected, who's forgotten, who's not contacted, who's not talked to, who's not spoken nicely by his children and his ex and so on? What must be like? How lonely, how sad, how depressed, how meaningless. And no wonder a lot of people resort to alcohol, because the people become depressed and alcohol because they don't become understood by the very near and dears. So most children and loved ones don't understand their father's sentient being. And they have one version of the father's do's and don'ts, or failures or success or whatever. As a result of that, we hold that kind of opinions regarding him, and then push him down the cliff, so to speak. And we think it's all his fault. And when we see the father go through many difficulties, we think he deserves it because he is the one who's wrong. What must be like to be that kind of father sentient being? All his 30, 40 years of generosity, dedication was completely thrown out of the window with the one little mistake of life's difficulties. So there's a whole lot of estranged fathers, not only from their children, but the grandchildren and so on, and then the other in-laws and everything. As a result of that, that whole 30 people wouldn't talk to you, or nobody wants to do. Now he is in his last 5 years of a lonely, elderly, frail time, and nobody wants to do anything about him. He's just barely remembered by them. What must be like to be an old man who has given all his love and kindness, but when he needs everybody's help, Nobody wants to know him. There are lots of such lonely fathers and grandfathers, misunderstood, rejected, and on contempt by those ungrateful children and grandchildren. And we don't want to be like that. We want to make a difference to his life at this very junction of his life. So therefore, in the context of understanding sentient beings, we have to understand the sufferings of one who is misunderstood, one who is not perfect, but he's been condemned for a little mistake and forgetting all the good he has done. There's a lot of people do that. And they think they cannot be bothered to reconcile with him because he did this. But they don't remember all the good big picture that he did. And they lump him with small mistakes, maybe to his alcoholism, maybe to his whatever things were, and then we think it's all his fault, poor thing. He was totally dependent on a very negative environment and culture where drinking and all those things as a part of the fun or happy hour, they call it. Maybe he had one too many happy hours, and he got used to the happiness of the hour of drowning him in the alcohol. And particularly if you are not showing him gratitude, you're not saying, "Sorry, Father, let's make things work together." And we are not doing that. What must be like to be the father whose 6, 7, or 3 or 4 children are not talking or misunderstanding of a number of reasons, and do not tell him, "I love you. I'm sorry, I forgive you. I've totally misunderstood you." So, if we understand sentient beings, particularly our father sentient beings, you can see the fatherness of the father in your life. You can see. You can see in the DNA. You can see you look in the picture, look in the photo, look in the mirror, your nose, your eyes, your hair, your body, all look alike him. You're a piece of him, biologically, emotionally, and probably financially too. Everything you have are his givings. Your education, your skill, your profession were all taught and managed and financed by his sweat and tear. Yet when he makes a little mistake in his life, we forget all of that. That's not understanding sentient beings. That's misunderstanding. That's blaming the father and think that we have right to stay angry and not talk to him and ignore him and not visit him, not tell him, not forgive him, not apologize him. Doing that is not only failure to understand father sentient beings, but it will soon bite yourself with guilt and depression. Some people are already depressed now because they have not reconnected with the father. For whatever version of the stories they took, and they are not reconnecting, they're not doing anything with them, for them, to them. Because of that, they are disconnected. As a result of that, they feel alienated. They feel forgotten. They feel neglected and abandoned. If certain communities, societies see that, they will see, "Oh gosh, you never talk to your father. That's terrible." They will see that as a not life, not living. Where does people's depression come from? Because they're failing to fulfill their filial duty to attend to their own immediate family like father, who is treated with contempt. One is contempting with them and condemning the father. And if someone condemns the father and you just follow suit, your reason is completely, following somebody else's. Be kind to him. Just if you are the father, then you know what's like to be misunderstood. For instance, I have 3 children. I have the most wonderful relationship with my children, because they understand me and our life together and so on. And now they are in their early 20s and someone even early 30, and like I don't see any We see once a week all the time, and when the and that's something in Tibetan people usually live together in one roof, under one roof, but I haven't got that privilege yet. I don't know whether it's a privilege or a burden. Some people might say it's a burden. Oh, he's still living. My 20-year-old son still lives with me. They think it's a big burden. He's a dependent on you. It's a burden on you. In the West, we think they are burden or they are dependent on me or vice versa. Anyway, so we don't have that kind of don't have. But if you have a son who's 30-year-old, or even some people have 40-year-old son and living under your roof and so on, and it's still very nice to be the father. He's still your young boy, and he's a 40-year-old man, but still he's your young boy. Fathers don't see you as an ungrateful boy. He will see still he's a young boy, my boy. He always sees you as my boy. You might be 55, 60 even. Your fathers don't see you as a 60-year-old man. He will see as my little boy. This is son. His perception of us is very different, and he wish we called him. He wish we say thank you to him, or we loved him, or we what can he do? What can we do for him? If he receive a call, it will make his day. You don't have to go and make him a 3-course meal or anything like that. It's also good to do occasionally, because he would have provided you millions of courses of meals by him and your mother. So for you to be able to do once in a blue moon to take him out or do things is no tall order. It's a filial duty. And that's if we are not doing that to our father. And what must be he? He says, I have a son or a daughter, but I don't know where she is. I never get a call from her. Now we are so important. We're wearing nice clothes, going out with friends, doing this. We don't have time for our parents. We don't have our father, sentient beings. He spent all his youth to raise us, to educate us, and when he has any difficulties, we're not willing to understand. We are willing to condemn him and let him suffer. And some people even doesn't call him my dear father. They don't even call my dad, let alone my dear father. They might even call the old man. And some people might just call him John. and they wouldn't even call a nice name. The karma of not treating and showing respect to our father will hit us in very, very soon in your later life. Those who have shown filial duty and be kind and generous and understanding and supportive to your father, they will have a lot of happy memories. That no matter how some years were difficult, but you have reconciled before he died, or even if he died, there's never too late to reconcile. Go to your headstone of your dad. In the West, they have cemeteries where they put the headstones of the dead. At least you may not forget the site where the headstone is, and go and take a bunch of flower and go and reconcile. It's never too late. It will lift a spirit of heavy burden from your shoulder of the resentment and the anger and neglect that you have practiced. I'm not saying you as a particular, just an example. You might have some. Maybe you have a sibling who unlike you have been very, very estranged from your father, and he chose to live like that all these years. You wish their relationship was better, and you don't wish. You go and make him to improve it, never too late. So therefore what we're talking is, how can we understand the sufferings and mistakes and wrong turns that our father went through without condemning him and try to resolve today, on this Father's Day, to 2022, and try to turn a chapter so that you actually did something useful from here onwards, so that this doesn't become a kind of a lingering problem from you to your father or like that. And even if your relation with your father is immaculate and very, very, very good, like say fortunate like me, but there are many others who are not as fortunate. You wish that the such and such will talk to the father, and they don't even know where the father is, and they haven't talked for years, and so on, and yet they feel very down, and they have this despair. It's a sadness. It's because they don't have a loving relationship with the immediate family members like their father, and that's the part of the reason. Family is very important. If family is very not important, go and renounce, shave your head, and go to the forest, and you are fit for it. Do it for a reason. If not, if you have the connection, don't stay in that state, but try to compensate that by making a resolve to do something to relieve his spirit of your father's karma wherever he is. If of course if he's alive, it's very good to go and talk to him and try to reconcile with him, and decide not to have this animosity or aversion anymore. This is ridiculous. This is not life, and try to give him a gift to say that you love him and you do no longer wish to hold your wrong views that has completely made you suffer this long, and admit your own, and don't blame it to your father. So doing that is very important, because then if you are perceived by your children to someone who has reconciled with the father and speaks very fondly and kindly, lovingly about your father, your children and grandchildren will remember that. If they never hear you talk nicely, fondly, kindly, compassionately, respectfully towards your father, they never have heard of that. And what does they say about you? And what that would say about your children, and what kind of role model they have. We're not talking about becoming a local hero, we're talking about a family hero, someone who loves his father, who shows respect, who honors his wishes, and who have reconciled with him, who speaks highly, lovingly, kindly, generously about the father. If that's what the children have heard you, that's going to be very important thing for them, because they have heard the story. You have spent time to talk to them lovingly about your father, his ups and downs, how you turn around, you understood, and how much lovingly you treat him with respect. If they knew that, that is making your children also understand what it takes for them to become parent, and of course, improve one's relationship with them. When people's relationship with the immediate family sentient beings are not good, and that's when the problem starts, When the immediate family member relationship is relatively good, they'll treat with that respect to other sentient beings. So understanding father sentient beings is extremely important, because your father and your mother is included here, and their contribution to your life is not a small matter. And we better say thank you and forgive me, apologize you before it is too late. If we haven't done, a lot of the stresses and problems people have are because they are still carrying this vengeance, this resentment, this anger towards their father or grandfather or immediate family members. And sure, there is a lot of karma behind this, not only in this particular life, but where before previous life. There's a lot of interesting karma. You wouldn't believe that was what you did to each other in the past. That is turned out to be like this in this life. And how can we make sure this is not repeated in the future is by changing the course of action. the understanding sentient being is understanding suffering for other sentient beings and understanding their mistakes and their wrong choices, and then seeing how unconscious they were, how unable, how much stress they were to be doing those things they were not able to know they were doing, to them, to you, to anybody. Only if they were in a fitter and more saner state of situation, they would have never gone through those directions. They would have never made those wrong turns. They would have never. But yet it is your own father trying to do all things for you and me and your relative or your siblings. He was multitudely, he had stresses from multitude reasons, and that's what made he, you know. It is not lack of chromosome, it is because of the burden of life. If you go to the doctor, they say, "Oh, you don't have this, you don't have that." But I will say it's due to multitude of stresses. So therefore, now we will spend a couple of moments here in silence and sit upright and be sincere and fix your serene attention to your father's difficulties and try to show empathy and compassion and forgiveness and unconditional support, and how you may do that to reconcile so that the heavy burden that he's gone through or we have towards them can be lifted by this conscious effort of meditation that we genuinely do out of goodwill. So I'll pause here for a few minutes. Please stay very present in this meditative state. Understanding Father, sentient being. He's suffering. What can I do? This should not go on. I'm sure I can put an end to it by resolving to do something good. So, to understand any sentient being, let alone our Father, means that if we understand a sentient being, that means we are able to increase our love, respect, and kindness towards him or her, and also we are more compassionate, we are more forgiving, we are more accepting who they are, what they were, what they did, and how they pan out to be. So in this last segment of this session today, I would like you to join me in a minute after I finish talking about it, to do a Tonglen meditation. Tonglen is a very important Mahayana Buddhist practice, which is Tong means to send, means loving kindness. You send loving kindness feeling towards all Father sentient beings, as well as all other sentient beings, by the way. The other sentient beings are just as important. And our Father is the kind of a catalyst for that, because we need to express our love and express our gratitude to our Father. And with this in mind, you need to breathe out all the loving, all the compassion. Maybe you can visualize on top of a crown, Buddha Amitabha or something on top of a crown. And then as we breathe out, you visualize, send your all love and kindness and compassion and support, understanding to your Father as you breathe out. Imagine your Father in a very clear, vivid picture right in front of you. You look into his eyes and feel that you have done your best to give him love or kindness and understanding, but you realize that the best way to understand sentient being like Father is still to express your loving kindness. With this in mind, as you breathe out, imagine the brilliant white light rays shining from you and Buddha Amitabha, who are all blessing you to send all loving kindness, white light rays of, you could talking about rays of light, rays of loving kindness goes to your Father, and then makes him feel very cheered, very moved, very loved, very supported, and very understood. So just imagine his whole persona, his whole appearance is completely changed and delighted by your loving kindness. And then that's Tong. That's Tong means to give, yeah? You give loving kindness. Tong means practice loving kindness. Then Len means to take or accept, means understand his suffering, which previously we may have or may not have understood, but now today in this meditation we make an extra attempt to understand his suffering and accept his suffering, that his suffering was largely contributed by multitude of causes and conditions that was beyond his control, poor man. He had so much burden, so much stress on him, but yet he pulled through quite well. So even if he suffered, even if you feel something let down by him, we should not blame him. We should feel compassionate. We failed to understand him in the past. We couldn't accept him and with his mistakes. There are lots of sentient beings whose small mistakes, we think that's too big a mistake for a man to do and therefore cancel all his goodness. This is completely wrong. That's why His Holiness Dalai Lama says, my religion is kindness. His question isn't who's right and who's wrong, that even if somebody is relatively wrong, it is our duty to practice compassion and then not make him feel condemned. So therefore, how do you practice Tong? So Len means to accept him, to understand him, to take his suffering if you can. Of course you can't take his suffering, particularly he's dead and he's gone. But still, we wanted to understand. We tell him, I understand you. And look in his eyes and then not control, not complain, not criticize, not put him down, not show your little dark face. This is what we did in the past. It's a complete waste of time. So instead, try to accept the multitude of causes and conditions that has conditioned him that is uncontrollably lost his plot, so to speak. And therefore, imagine as you inhale, imagine from his heart, your father is he's all the blaming and all the negative, all the criticism that you put or others did to him that has really made him to hurt. Imagine you're taking all of them back. This is ridiculous. Man doesn't deserve that. He's old, frail, and he's condemned by people like you, who should be the first one to defend him, to take his suffering and help him to recover, and hold his hand and tell him, I'm sorry, my dad, I'm here for you no matter what goes with you. But some people, instead, they walk off. How can we do that? So therefore, Tonglen meditation is practicing loving kindness. When you breathe out, white light goes in and he's completely become cheered and motivated and loved. And when you inhale, take all his sufferings. Imagine as you breathe in, all his suffering, all the misunderstanding we have, and all of his own habitual wrong habits. All you inhale, they come to you as you inhale. They come in a dark force of energy, and you inhale, goes in your heart chakra where your own self-centeredness is there like a dark dot, and it explodes there, and both your problem and theirs become completely, dissolve into emptiness. So with this in mind, you do the Tonglen meditation. Of course, we're talking about Tonglen meditation with your father, sentient being, who we have in the past failed to understand. But it could be also you. Say, if you may do this self-Tonglen with yourself as a father figure, that you have maybe say you are maybe very lovingly understood by your children with no big grievances. But there are others who may have a different opinion about you as a father. You wouldn't believe. Your children might be all very happy with you, but someone else's think that you haven't been quite a good father. So if somebody else have a different opinion, you got to now accept that suffering to yourself, by yourself. So understand, do the self-Tonglen with yourself as the father, that others hasn't understood you and put you down and criticized and condemned and so on. Just do the self-Tonglen with yourself, this present father, to your past person who have been misunderstood by others. Maybe some of your children have many, many complaints to make register to you. And so if they are, just learn to accept them out of compassion. So because this is I'm just talking to you about how to do self-Tonglen if you're a father figure and you have not accepted the misunderstanding by other people. You should accept. You should practice compassion to yourself, by yourself as a father. Of course, here in today's case, it's try to practice the Tonglen with your own father, and in many cases, your grandfather, and for that matter, we wish all other people out there do the same understanding of their father sentient beings and did these loving kindness and compassion to their father. If they did that, and then it will resolve quite a lot of thing. And understanding sentient beings means you always see them with great degree of greater heart, understanding, and compassion. How do you know that you have practiced, you understand father sentient beings? Your tenderness, your kindness, your respect towards them have registered into your heart. Your resentment, your anger and your aversion, your hurt, your contempt towards has been reduced. And that is you got to see whether you have a need to do that. You have a need to do that. Maybe you're adequately good with your father. You don't need to do Tonglen. You have done already real life Tonglen. You visit him regularly. You write to him. You do things for him. Yes, some people do that. They say, particularly on today, this Sunday, and One Sunday a year. That's on, that's there's there's 52 Sundays, but there's only one Sunday. One out of 52 is not a lot, not a lot. So we're not. We are talking about how to increase the frequency of showing loving kindness, compassion, and generosity, and respect to your Father, sentient beings. When you do that, you wouldn't believe. Even if you went out and spent $100 or more just to tell your Father that you love him, you wouldn't believe how rewarding a feeling that was. How much it completely put a smile on his face, and how much his whole way of relating to life completely improves because you have been able to be so pertinent to be able to do that magic called giving. We have to give if we are alive to our Father sentient beings. If those who are not giving to the Father sentient beings, they don't remember how much they have already received from him, and they don't remember any receiving, and they can't give anything. Everything we are and we have is our Father's kindness, our Father's sweat and tear. And yet when we want to give something, we just don't want to do even one Sunday for a year. That's ridiculous. So one should do regularly. The more regularly you show your kindness and compassion to someone as important as your Father, that much your effort, your everyday living, everyday energy, that will be meaningful, because you have reconciled with someone. You're friends with your Father again. You're loving him again. You have rediscovered the love. This is not the love we're talking about, people attracted to some other person. This is not that kind of a sensorial love that comes and goes. This is a filial duty. This is a karmic duty. This is, even animals have this amazing sense of gratitude, whoever has been kind to them. Animals show kindness to show their tenderness to whoever they are kind to. So if we have been received the kindness for 30, 40 years of his life he spent, and still we don't want to remember, human beings are very forgetful. It's not because of chromosome. They're just not mindful. So with this in mind, I'd like you to do this short meditation, Tonglen meditation. You sit upright, imagine your Father in front of you or somewhere wherever he is, and look in his eyes and send a loving kindness feeling to him. You can say, may my Father be well and happy and understood, and be respected, and be talked to nicely, spoken to kindly, and may I do that myself from here onwards. With this in mind, you send loving kindness, and then when you inhale, you take on all his misunderstandings, all the difficulties, all his setbacks, and don't lump blame on him, but you take responsibility to make him feel supported and help to relieve. So in this way, you try to use your inhalation to take the suffering, exhalation to give the loving kindness. So stay very present and do this for a few minutes. And after that, I'll take some questions if you have. Thank you. Okay, everyone. Thank you for that. We will. I'll take a few questions. If you have, please feel free to either raise your hand. Those on Zoom, it's very easy to do, and unmute yourself, or type the question in the chat box. And I will try to also access any question if people wanted to type in the Facebook, since I got my iPad right here. So please feel free to do. I'm usually not able to do that because I'm not so apt to do that, and I'm trying to become apt now. So anyway, so any questions, please feel free to put your hands up and unmute yourself. Yeah.
By taking on others' suffering, today our father's suffering upon ourselves, it's not like we're heaping suffering upon ourselves, is it? But how does it destroy one's own self-cherishing?
Oh, sure, Kathy, that's a good question. Yeah, it's when the word says taking sufferings. Taking suffering really means accepting them and then not judge them, not condemn them. And as a result of that, we do not boost our ego in a selfish way to develop aversion that we may have done in the past. So it will calm, it will destroy our righteousness, wouldn't it? It will reduce our resentment, and it will probably nullify our resentment. You can see how stupid we are to think of his suffering in a very righteous way, as we have no flaws of our own. Because of that, Tonglen is a more meaningful to ourselves than actually it removes their suffering. How much their suffering is removed or taken is also possible, because when their suffering is dependent on our aversion, if we reduce our aversion, their suffering will automatically be reduced. If they knew that we don't have the same resentment and judgment towards them, then they will put at ease, and they will also spiritually feel there's no heavy dense and energy from us coming from us, and of course naturally it will decrease their worries and anxiety. So because everything is very dependently originated, when we do the Tonglen, Tonglen is mutually beneficial. It's probably more beneficial to us in the short term than to them in the short term. In the long term, it's beneficial for both, because anyone who does accept their father, and then they are no longer putting a bar or putting a boundary between the father, they're actually starting to talk, starting to have things to do, things common with each other, and otherwise there's no relationship, no communication. There is this neglecting. Both are avoiding each other. This is cause of many people's depression. And when you do Tonglen, it actually opens the window. It brings the wall down between us. And so when the Berlin Wall fell down, the suffering of East and West Germany was destroyed. And not only that, it made so many people in the world feel. So we are talking about bringing down the wall of misunderstanding by doing Tonglen.
Can we do Tonglen not in a formal situation, just while doing other activities?
Ideally you should do what we call Tonglen as a rehearsing in the meditation, and Tonglen as in real life situation. So in real life situation, if you're generous, if you're loving, if you're kind and compassionate, that's a real life Tonglen. Life is all about giving and taking. And we always what we have is always came from others. It's just question is how much we are giving that other people need. And say even if you go to work, your place of work needs your time and energy to do whatever, And if you did them not only the expectation of your boss, but he or she feels, oh, today Kathy did so much more than she usually able to do. I'm so happy. Uh, your boss or your colleague feels so much helped, supported like no other ordinary day. And they feel as if you have done more than your fair share of your duty because of your cooperativeness, because your tactfulness, your generosity, your respect, your skill, and your compassion, your willingness, your cooperativeness. When they see that, that is loving kindness. That is kindness. And when you see they are going through some difficulty, you spend time to support them and understand them and not make them feel let down by their mistakes or like that, and try to support them. These are real life Tonglen. Real life, every day to day is a practice of Tonglen. And we don't call Tonglen, we call them service, we call them service, and we call them Bodhisattva's way of life. Bodhisattva's way of life is Tonglen every day. But this idea of sitting in somewhere in Western Tibet, like Atisha did, the Tonglen, is just rehearsing that when you're on your own, how to rehearse your mind to do that, and then try to implement that in real action. So it's more important that you actually do in everyday life without putting a title, I'm doing Tonglen, So that's why it is important to be doing very discreetly lots of Tonglens. Well, so if you have no more questions or comments, thank you. We are going to conclude here. Thank you, everybody, for giving your time and attention. And there are many who I can recognize are all fathers, and some even grandfathers, so they can relate to this. And others who are also uh, mothers or grandmothers. Of course, you too have your father, and we have good reason to. There's a question. Okay. There's another one question here is how may I contribute to the healing of the relation between my father and his father? Oh yes, Roberto. Of course, if a lot depends how good can you assist your own immediate father. Uh, the more you are able to support your father by what we're talking now, can positively inspire and motivate him to make him to recall all the what we call recognizing. First, you have to reconnect. Your father have to reconnect with his father. He has to remember all the kind and compassion, selfless thing that his father did to him. And in order to heal, he has to deal with his grandfather. He has to deal with the story honestly and correctly, historically, and do not put some under the carpet and ignore them, and try to rekindle his memory, because his memory is very patchy. When people are aversive, they avoid it. Oh yeah, he does nothing, type of thing. But every little mistake, that's everything. So they're very mean. So you have to make him to become more generous towards his father, and he can do that if you show that. If you show your generous and respect and kindness to your father, he will be inspired. I too should be treating like this to my father. And so sometimes some fathers never got motivated by anyone, and so they never are reconnecting with his father. And so therefore we have a duty to influence each other, We have to influence for yourself to your father and talk to him, sit and spend time with him, ask him about the real story of him and his father, and make him to actually recollect him and tell the stories he hasn't told you and he has refused to tell because of his aversion, his animosity, or whatever. He hasn't told the whole story. And help him to regurgitate the real story that he has not told, and he has decided to turn it down and ignore because he's so mean. Because if your father is very mean to your father, his father, that's the cause of his own suffering. That's the cause of his own inability to reconcile with him and deal with him, because he's full of aversion and anger and righteousness. Now you have a good moral duty. Try to not tell him that, but try to make him feel that how much you love him, how much you deserve to have some influence to your father's happiness, so that he does not stay this cold, rigid, righteous feeling towards his father. And if he has that, that will really add to your father's misery, and he will not know how to heal. So before that, your father needs to heal himself. Your father needs to do the healing with himself. See, he has to do self-tonglen. He has to accept himself, and he has to reconcile with his own righteousness towards his father. And when he does the healing with himself, he has to learn to practice forgiveness to himself for not understanding his father this long. And then he become fit to now to actually go and deal and heal with his father, so that you too, as the grandchild of your grandfather and child of your father, actually is playing a very pivotal role to help them to turn a new chapter by learning to understand what's like to be in the shoes of the father. Now you understand your father because you try to be in his shoes. But has your father made the attempt to be in the shoes of his father? This is the question. And he has not. If he's not dealing with it very well, he's not healing with his father, it's because he is refusing to see from the point of view is your grandfather, let alone try to be compassionate to his father's suffering and the problems and so on. And when your father stops being righteous and resentful and anger, he will starting to show loving kindness, gratitude. He will sit down and remember all the good that his father has done. You have to be instrumental in influencing him, what I call make an inventory of kindness that your father received from his father. Help him to do that. And that will really help him. That will really help your father to deal with his father and reconcile with that, because he's otherwise not looking at that. He's only highlighting and amplifying few things that your father may or may not have done right way. He's always resenting that. In his amplifying that, he couldn't switch his mind off those things. He need to put that in another scale, bring two scale and put that on one scale, put all the things his father did to him on another scale. And that way he should be fair to his father. And when he knows he has been fair to his father, then he will drop his anger. He will come to know, oh, I'm being selfish. I'm being so self-centered. I'm so righteous. I'm so ignorant. I'm so ungrateful. No wonder why I have not been able to reconcile and forgive with my father, and therefore my own depression, and therefore my own alcoholism, because of that, this. So he can see the causal chain of his own unproductiveness. And so you have the good karmic duty to hold your father's hand and talk to him, look in his eyes, assist him to get over this and really make a good U-turn, because you are asking this very important question. This is exactly the point of this topic, what we are doing these days, understanding sentient beings. We are not talking about sentient beings in the other side of the universe whether they are life in the moon or Mars. We're not talking about that. We're talking about the sentient beings who are in the immediate circle of our family, who are misunderstood, who are not talking to each other, who are treating each other with contempt. And this is toxic. We have money, we have house, we have car, and we have degree, but we have no happiness. Why? Because there's no love, there's no respect, there's no kindness, there's no compassion, and there's no forgiveness. And these things are real cause of happiness if they are life ever can happen. These are emotionally intelligent attributes of our well-being. And your chromosome will improve after that. So with that we will conclude here, everybody. Thank you very much. How are you, Peter? Peter is a 90-year-old. He turned 90 a couple of weeks ago. Happy birthday and happy Father's Day. And of course, Phil is also happy, and he's a grandfather as well. And who else? Of course, both Paul and Anthony are both fathers. And Chris, I don't know whether you have children or not. Joe, I don't know whether you are male or female. Anyway, so Don may be father. so anyway, so everyone has interesting network of sentient beings. And today just spotlight happened to be on the father and your relationship with him. Otherwise, amazing sentient beings and you. That's all about that. Buddha is not interested between you and the gods, but you and sentient beings. And he just wished sentient beings were kind to each other. And that's what we have to do. Thank you very much. So today we're going to do the dedication merits, and I'm going to do in my father language, and you can do in English, okay? You can do in English. If you do in German, if your father language is German, do in German. If your father language is Maori, do in Maori. If your father language is Aboriginal, do in Aboriginal language. Therefore, I'm going to do the dedication in Tibetan. Thank you very much. Ozona deye damje zebanye damne nye bedana bamje de Kegana je bala drubaye sibe zalen drawa drawara jo tejo damje renje jendele dage zonamantaye agandoba dene droge tejo dambe je renje jema amebe ne juro je jamba bawe chedra jamba da Kundu zamba deya dejende Deda gunje jezo daloje Gewa deda danje Rado ngo chanju zemjo rimboje Magye bana manje juroje Geba nyamba mebaye Kone gondo bewa yo. Thank you, everyone.